Okay, so we're going to create a mug again. This is a review. We've just pulled one form. I'm going to throw a second form. So 1.5 pounds of clay, wheel wedging, pressing downwards to the center of the wheel head, and then sliding your hands up that clay. I can't say often enough, this is not about pushing and pulling against yourself. It's pushing down to the wheel head. So really you can lean over your clay. I haven't talked about that in any of these videos, which is where you're sitting at the wheel. You can see I'm right up on top of the wheel. My knees are like halfway around the wheel. Everybody's a different size and shape, so how comfortable they are sitting at the wheel, but you do not want to sit way back. I can't control very much if I'm way away from my stuff. I really need to be up and on top of it so that I have more control and I can use my body as leverage against all this pressure that's being exerted on me and the clay. So now I'm going to center, so pressing into the clay. Again, I'm thinking about really compressing this down and right into the middle of my wheel head. So heel of left hand, elbow in my hip, right hand starts with a karate chop kind of motion, but you can soften it to make a nice little round mound. I'm going to clean away that skirt of clay. Make sure it really is centered entirely. Ease off gently so that I don't jump off and knock it out of center. Going to drop into the well, find the center of clay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm in. Okay? If your fingers are not as strong, go to the thumbs. Put one thumb on top of the other and press down into that clay. Needle tool to check my thickness of my base. Right there, that's as thin as I want to go. I don't want to be thinner than about 1/2 inch. I'm going to open up the well. Again, thinking about the size of my mug overall. Do I want it to be a wide mug or a narrow mug? It is determined right now. You cannot change that shape once you've pulled open your well. Open a little bit more. I tend to like bigger mugs. It's all about, you know, enjoying a cup of coffee or tea. And so I don't want to have to go back and refill 15 times. So I tend to pull a little bit bigger, and it feels better in your hand. And you also may have learned or are learning that clay shrinks. So it will shrink as it dries. It will shrink again in the bisque fire, and it will shrink again in the glaze fire. So if you make the size mug that you love when it's right now, it's going to shrink by 10 to 12%. So you do want to make your piece a little bit larger than you think you want it to be in the end. And then it should come out nicely. So I'm raising walls, knuckle under, hands overlapped, pressure on that wall even all the way up to the top edge. Stop, compress that top edge. Use water as much as you need. Way better to have too much water than not enough. The only place you don't want water to set is just inside your clay all the time. You always want to pull out that extra moisture. So fingers overlapped. Raise that wall straight up. If you happen to be pulling and you just, you know, you're concentrating and focusing and, oh my gosh, I just opened it up into a bowl, that's okay. You can collar that back in. And it's kind of important to keep it collared in and to keep that cylinder shape as you're pulling the walls up for your mug, because you really can see the height that you're creating and really determine what shape it is that you want to pull. Okay, so back up into a cylinder, compress that edge, clean off that low skirt of clay. Really helps that you can see what your piece is doing and where your clay is. As beginners, we tend to leave a lot of clay here. I did as well when I was learning how, and for quite a while, and then I learned to really put my knuckle on the wheel head, press in at that base, and then move up and keep that even pressure. Or again, if you're a fingertip person, fingertips really down at the bottom, okay? Raise that wall. And you want to do maybe 3 to 5 passes on pulling your wall up. You don't want to do it more than that, because the more you handle your clay, the weaker it gets, the more we tend to knock it out of round, and you get a nice wonky piece instead of a smooth piece. So you really want to be minimal with how much you're handling the clay. So I've got my basic cylinder shape, so I got to think about what shape do I want to pull this time. Let's do, it's kind of straightforward from what we just did, but let's do this shape just so it's very different than the one that I did before. So the bottom and the top rim are going to be about the same width, but in the center I'm going to collar it through. So I'm going to pull out moisture. I don't want it just to be sitting there. I did forget, I'm going to jump in real quick and compress that bottom on the inside. Make that really nice and smooth and firm. Not take out a whole lot of clay, just really compressing what's soft clay already. And now I'm going to create that curve. So I'm not going to start collaring in at the base, but I'm going to have my fingers at the base, and as I move up and into my piece, I'm going to collar a little bit more. Make that as narrow as possible in the middle, and then collar back out to meet up with that outside shape again. So I've begun to kind of give it a waistline, so I'm going to do that same thing again. Just bring it in a little bit. And you don't always have to work from the bottom to the top every time you collar. You can go in and collar just in a specific area. It doesn't have to be the whole mug. I could go straight in and just collar in the center. I just know in this case it's really going to give me, you know, a ridge or a very distinctive area where I've done that. I'm going to stretch it back out a little bit. So the thing about collaring and why you see me go from top to bottom or bottom to top isn't because I'm putting pressure in all places, but just because I'm gliding and kind of guiding that shape to be really consistent, and I can feel that better if I go up and down the full surface of the piece. Okay? But now I've really got that kind of bottom of an hourglass shape that I was going for. I can refine that using all of these tools that we've got, whether it's a metal rib or a wooden rib or the rubber rib. All of these are really handy when you're shaping something. So you can use that wooden rib even on the outside to kind of compress. On the inside, I'm pressing my fingers against the piece. It does make it a little harder to make that center portion as round. So maybe I'll switch gears and use this guy and use either this rounded part or this rounded part. In this case, it kind of heading right to that waistline or right in the middle of the piece. So compressing that around. Or you could use this and really use that as a guide. Say maybe you like this curve. So you can see there's a gap between my piece and the rib. So on the inside, I can actually stretch that clay back open and match the curve of the rib if I like that better. So there's lots of ways to use these tools as an extension of your hand. Again, if I want to use this metal rib, it's very flexible and I can get that absolutely smooth finish. I tend not to do the super smooth too often myself, again, because these are handmade items and I want them to be handmade. I don't mind at all that my fingerprints are on them or that they're shaped to the shape that's comfortable with my hand shape. That's why we hand build things or hand make things on the wheel. Okay, so there's my kind of concave mug. I'm going to just clean out the water from the inside. I'm going to smooth that rim. Again, if I don't have a little piece of plastic, I can just use my fingertips that are wet and round the piece, or I can use a sponge to do the same kind of thing, just roll it around. Not much pressure at all. This is really just the surface that I'm focused on. Or if my piece of plastic is still somewhat, oh, there it is, it's in the wheel. These do tend to disappear. You have to be careful with your plastic. So I'm going to just wrap that little bit around and get that super smooth, nice shape. And then cutting it off the wheel puddle, wire tool, slide right through, push that right into the puddle, move that out of my way. Since I have released it and it's sitting in the puddle, it can sit here for a minute or so, not forever, but a little while, and it won't get re-stuck to the wheel head. Now this shape's a little harder to remove. I put piece fingers in it and I'm going to jam it kind of into my shape. So in this case, I'm just going to push it right off onto my hand and set it down that way. So that's another way to remove a piece. It's easier to remove it if it's narrow. If I had a big old bowl and I tried to slide it by hand, it would get all wonky at the base. But this works for now. So these mugs are going to sit and dry. Again, this would be an overnight for most students. You would drape some plastic over the top. If it's really rainy weather, you would actually leave them unwrapped. But if it was warm weather, if we're throwing and it's 60, 70, 80 degrees outside during the day, then you definitely need to put plastic over them or they will dry too much overnight and you will end up with a bone dry piece which you cannot join a handle to. Most important in mugs is that your base has to be leather hard, or when you go to put the handle on the second day, it will not attach. It may look like it's attached the first day, but either in the kiln or before that, when it's drying to bone dry, that handle will literally pop off and just drop. So we want to make sure that this clay stays moist from overnight.